First things first, I'ma say all the words inside my head. I'm fired up and
The game today. 125 moves, if I'm not mistaken, that they made in this game until there was a conclusion, until there was a winner. So without any further ado, we enter the game. We enter the game with a meme opening, which Hikaru has played against Magnus, of all people. B3. Hans replies, of course, in this, you're always taught to attack the center. D5. Bishop B2. Knight F6. D3. C5. Knight F3. Bishop G4. Knight D2. Knight C6. E3. E5. Now we've reached at a point where it's the sixth move. We're out of the opening, kind of. Now is the battle of the center. And I'll say in this type of situation, Hans is the one who is more. I don't have the evil bar right now, but Hans is the one who's more or less in charge because he has all these squares. He can put his knight here. Obviously, he can be kicked out. But of course, this pawn becomes a weakness in the future, obviously. But he has all this space. He has taken all this space in Hikaru's territory, in his line. Yeah. So obviously he's won the opening battle. The game continues with h3, bishop takes f3, knight takes f3, bishop takes d6, joking, bishop d6, we have g3, we have a5, we have a4, and we have castles. Now we've reached this position where the game is so stagnant. When I was watching this on Title Tuesday, this was a draw. I cannot lie to you. In this position, anybody is drawing this position because Hans is obviously this move. Hikaru here is probably going to play this move and castle as well. There's really nothing going on in Hikaru's position. As a person with the white pieces, he is not attacking prospect. He's not attacking anyway. Only two pieces have been traded, a bishop and a knight. So the game is so stagnant that it's a draw. There's really nothing. And we know, obviously, when Hans plays, most of these top players, he normally plays for a draw or they draw against Hans because they don't want to draw out the game, more or less. So, of course, the game continues with a4, rook e8, bishop g2, queen d7, and castles, as I was saying. And we're still in fresh water, so there's nothing really interesting. We have rook to d8, we have queen to e2, we have queen to c7, we have rook to d1, we have h6. That's where the game now spice up. If you're very interested, the game now spices up because why? White now has a target. We can push this. And why do I say that's a target? Because in the moment of pushing this, after the h6, in the moment of pushing something like this, after something like takes, or even takes with the bishop, causing the knight to take back, if this, you can also kind of remember there's already strain in the fact that like here you be actually recognized to also take the pawn. So after something like this, because if it goes down, you also have to think this move. So what I'm saying, the targets at these 2 pawns, they are very weak because you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and a potential 5th attacker on that 1 pawn on the E line. So that's a very good possibility. We have knight to b1 going back, obviously trying to reroute the knight back to its original square. Again, the same idea I was saying. We're trying to attack this square or at least attack the pawn so we can get it. Knight to e7. The game continues. e4. Knight to c6. c3. d4. Knight a3. And now we have d takes c3. And this was shocking. Why would you take that pawn? Because this is a perfect structure. Nothing is disturbing that. I understand that in this position you are more or less limited on moves, but you could try also rerouting this knight. It's doing nothing there. It's really doing nothing. The queen keeps grab of almost all these light squares here, so the knight needs to be rerouted somehow, and I would feel like this is the best way. Taking it back, yeah, taking it back there, then bring it maybe to the center or something like that. But he decides to take the pawn instead. With takes, with bishop takes, obviously it's the obvious move. With knight to d4, he moves this knight to the center. And obviously the idea is to say, if you take, oh sorry about that. You see, now I've ruined it. I've ruined it. I've ruined it, man. I ruined it. But we can still continue. I think we'll move what? Nope. That move. In this move, yeah, here. The reason why the knight moves inside is because if I take, I don't know, I took it, then it moved me to a move where bishop takes again. So I don't know how that works. But if you take this, then black now has some sort of control over your, almost like your center, but also it limits mobility of any pieces, because now these 2 pawns, both of these like 4 pawns here, like the black and white pawns, will be stuck there for the remainder of the game, obviously. So Hikaru does not take that, but instead he adds more pressure onto the knight, saying that eventually there's gonna be a move that is called f4. F4 causes me to either take this pawn or you to defend it more, you opening up your own position, whereas I have a light square bishop and you have a dark square bishop. You understand? We have knight to h7 with bishop x d4. We take, which is surprising. Why would you take now? I don't know his idea, so let's find out. But instead of taking with the pawn, Hans takes with the queen, which is genius, by the way. Obviously, we are trying to get rid of all the attacking pieces, and again, if he does not take back, you somewhat have a good leverage attack on this pawn, and you are keeping it there just in case if this rook ever moves, you are getting the pawn for free. So we have queen c2. Obviously, you're not going to trade the queens there. We know why. The pawn structure. We have b6, with knight to c4, knight to g5, h4, knight to e6, sorry, knight to h3, queen to d7, bishop takes e6. I don't understand why. Tell me why. You move the knight back, it goes back. You attack the knight, the queen goes back. Then you take the knight still. What about the pressure? That one, the pressure there was good enough. Why take? Because now he's gonna take with the rook and potentially double up on that one. So I didn't understand this move very much. Maybe because I'm not a grandmaster. Obviously, I'm not a grandmaster. But that move did not make sense to me. I don't know if it made sense to you. So you let me know. But then we have queen to e2. So now the queen is getting rerouted to the king side. I don't understand why. So this game was so confusing. I think that's why it was so long. It was so confusing. So they continue maneuvering. Everything is maneuvered. Everything is maneuvered. This game is so long. Here they traded the pieces, which is incredible by Hans, by the way, because here he noticed that there's going to be a combination between the queen and the knight, and he does not want that. So instead, why not get rid of Hikaru's piece that is very active, as his rooks are not very active, and his rooks are, in fact, his pieces are, except the bishop, are very active. So why not me? I get active while you stay there. Plus, I'm also endangering your own. What can I say? Something's moving my shirt. Are you gonna say? Why don't I just damage your structure? Takes. That, then that. Did you see the sequence? Hans has calculated the fact that he can actually now, in some way, he has more than Hikaru. Hikaru decided having the most powerful pieces in the game. Hans has more mobility. He has more, I would say, grip onto the game because of like the movement of the pieces. Because like his bishop is ready to move immediately after this moves in time. Because the bishop now is actually, his eyes are now open. It's not a protector of here. So even he can even move the f pawn instead to f5 to try to trade them off here. Actually, it's f4 to trade the pawns here, having a pawn there, and moving maybe the rook there, you just push it down as well, just to clamp down that side as well. So you never really know. So this bishop is gonna be a very powerful piece in the game if he gives it though. That's the interesting thing. So now we have h5 with king to g8. Now the kings are moving. We have king to f3. We have rook to d4. Obviously now we are maneuvering, but here I like the placement of the rook, because the rook, not only does it keep the king away, you know, momentarily, obviously, it kind of takes control of any movements that you might do with any of your pawns. It kind of, like, it does that. It does that so well. If amateurly, if you move your pawns, black is going to lose. No, not black, white is going to lose, sorry. So now the game continues. King moves. We have king to f7. We're now maneuvering. We're maneuvering. Now the king protects here, so he's like, okay, it's time for me to make my own pieces active. So now the plan is to go here. The plan is to go somewhere here to trade off the one of your pieces that are actually powerful. But the question is, Hans gonna allow that? Obviously not, because the rook is the one which is kind of keeping control into the game. The rook is the one which is keeping control, some sort of control into the game. Let me change this. The rook is the one that's keeping some sort of control into the game. With rook b4, obviously. But that move, I did not really understand it, because... But I guess again, and now I could say I understand it, because you could take with this pawn and say this pawn cannot go anywhere because I want to take anyways. But now you could claim that I have a clamp on now that side, and my king can just sit with my bishop for the longest of time, and it's a draw. You get me? So that could be something that he could claim. So the rook's move, but the rook does not move it immediately there. Instead, he protects, obviously, because if you immediately try to go here, you lose this, potentially eventually losing one of these ones as well. So okay, the game continues. I actually didn't see that. It's only now that I'm actually seeing that. Okay, so now another maneuvering game. The pieces move up and down. In fact, there's a point where I thought there was going to be a repetition. In this point, after the rook goes down, the bishop comes, the rook moves again. But Ricardo's one who didn't repeat. I think if Ricardo really genuinely repeated, Hans was going to repeat, because, yeah, you know what I mean? No, actually, if Hans repeated, I think Ricardo might have repeated as well, you know. But the game continues. They maneuver, they move their pieces around. There's nothing really important happening. Like, there's barely anything that, like, is worth mentioning. They trade some pawns, they move their pieces up and down. See, now I'm lagging a little bit, but yeah, game continues. Oh shit, I just broke my mouse. It's crazy, by the way. It's crazy. I did drop it the other day, but yeah, everything continues. They maneuver. They don't even move 100. Can you believe it? They are maneuvering all this time. Now I would have offered a draw by now. I think maybe one of them offered a draw. The game continues. They maneuver. There's a check. They maneuver around. They still not draw. You can't win some pawns, but it's not enough. Now, king e5. King e5. That's very interesting. And why do I say that? King e5 is ingenious, because you're trying to keep your king away from the pawns. You run away pawns. You're trying to keep your king away from that. These pieces are so doing their job beautifully. Yeah, beautifully. Now these rooks, they can't really do anything, because if this rook moves, there's a potential of eventually losing this one, or even the potential of there being a queen if one of these pawns make it to the right square. You get me? Obviously. So the game continues. There's a rook check. The king moves back again. So now it's like, okay, are we having a draw or not? Because we have played this for too long. We're moving 89. There's another check. There's a back again. There's a check again. But no. Hans is like, no, you know what? I see something. Those two pawns, they could be my queen somewhere there, bruv. I need my queen, you know. I can't lie. So he kind of is like, cool. Okay. let me deny you that queen, because immediately when you move this, you're losing this, buddy. And if you move this, you're gonna lose it anyways. You get me? So instead, he goes for the bishop check. The king moves near the pawns. So now there is no more. There's no more promotion of the pawn. The queen, for momentarily, obviously, if the king ever moves, and if this pawn is ever here, there's some period where like the rook is somewhere here, king is somewhere here. It's chai, obviously. Yeah, there's no going back. Okay, the game continues. Check. We'll get rid of the pieces, the big pieces. Now they're there. Again, we start maneuvering again and again and again. Some pawns are traded. Again, like I said before, the most influential piece in the game is the bishop. Without the bishop, black would have lost. So he's making sure he keeps the bishop exactly where it should be. Maneuver, 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 maneuver. Now we reach to this position here. You have a pawn against 2 pawns. How do we reach to this position? Hans sacrificed the pawn so that he could get his king near his pawn, so that if he's pushing it down, there's a possibility of the possibility of, of getting the pawn. And again, if you push this, just pin that and move your king next to the pawn. I guess something like that. You get me? Yeah, something like that. So okay, the game continues. Push, pin, like I said. This that now. Yeah, the game ends. It has to end. Because when I said it, it made sense into my head. And you know why I'm gonna mention it like that? Because I'm gonna put it like that because I am not an experienced player. Me as a player all I think about is I am pinning a piece. And in this case, it's a pawn. I do not think about what happens after. You get me? And I think that's how Hans just momentarily forgot who he's playing against. So on that moment, he just moved the piece, then realized I'm getting pinned as well. I'm pinning something, but something is gonna pin me. And even though after this and this, he tried to make a calculation of, can I still win without the pawn, without the bishop? And the win rate is saying no, because there's this, but they just takes. When you take, there's this, and you can't get close because this king is blocking your entry, immediate entry, and if you take longer, there's a queen on the board. So that's how Hikaru won. Shockingly, Hikaru won that game. Shockingly, from a b3 opening, he struggled most of the game, and just one mistake made. When you think like a 1400, like myself, that's what happens. Hope you enjoy the game.